I was particularly concerned by his report that one of the Watergate defendants, Howard Hunt, was threatening blackmail unless he and his lawyer were immediately given $120,000 for legal fees and family support, and that he was attempting to blackmail the White House not by threatening exposure on the Watergate matter, but by threatening to reveal activities that would expose extremely sensitive, highly secret national security matters that he had worked on before Watergate. I probed, questioned, tried to learn all Mr. Dean knew about who was involved, what was involved. I asked more than 150 questions of Mr. Dean in the course of that conversation. He said to me, and I quote from the transcripts directly, "I can just tell from our conversation that these are things that you have no knowledge of." It was only considerably later that I learned how much there was that he did not tell me then. For example, that he himself had authorized promises of clemency, that he had personally handled money for the Watergate defendants, and that he had suborned perjury of a witness. I knew that I needed more facts. I knew that I needed the judgments of more people. I knew the facts about the Watergate cover-up would have to be made public, but I had to find out more about what they were before I could decide how they could best be made public. I returned several times to the immediate problem posed by Mr. Hunt's blackmail threat, which to me was not a Watergate problem, but one which I regarded, rightly or wrongly, as a potential national security problem of very serious proportions. I considered long and hard whether it might in fact be better to let the payment go forward, at least temporarily, in the hope that this national security matter would not be exposed in the course of uncovering the Watergate cover-up. I believed then, and I believe today, that I had a responsibility as president to consider every option, including this one, where production of sensitive national security matters was at issue, protection of such matters. In the course of considering it, and of just thinking out loud, as I put it at one point, I several times suggested that meeting Hunt's demands might be necessary. But then, I also traced through where that would lead. The money could be raised, but money demands would lead inescapably to clemency demands, and clemency could not be granted. I said, and I quote directly from the tape, "It is wrong, that's for sure." I pointed out, and I quote again from the tape, "But in the end, we are going to be bled to death. And in the end, it is all going to come out anyway. And then you get the worst of both worlds. We are going to lose, and people are going to," then Mr. Haldeman interrupts me and says, "and look like dopes." And I responded, "and in effect look like a cover-up, so that we cannot do." Now I recognize that this tape of March 21 is one which different meanings could be read in by different people. But by the end of the meeting, as the tape shows, my decision was to convene a new grand jury and to send everyone before the grand jury with instructions to testify. Whatever the potential for misinterpretation there may be as a result of the different options that were discussed at different times during the meeting, my conclusion at the end of the meeting was clear. And my actions and reactions, as demonstrated on the tapes that follow that date, show clearly that I did not intend the further payment to Hunt or anyone else be made. These are some of the actions that I took in the weeks that followed in my effort to find the truth, to carry out my responsibilities to enforce the law. As the tape of our meeting on March 22nd, the next day, indicates, I directed Mr. Dean to go to Camp David with instructions to put together a written report. I learned 5 days later, on March 26, that he was unable to complete it. And so on March 27, I assigned John Ehrlichman to try to find out what had happened, who was at fault, and in what ways, and to what degree. One of the transcripts I'm making public is a call that Mr. Ehrlichman made to the Attorney General on March 28, in which he asked the Attorney General to report to me, the President, directly any information he might find indicating possible involvement of John Mitchell or by anyone in the White House. I had Mr. Haldeman separately pursue other independent lines of inquiry. Throughout, I was trying to reach determinations on matters of both substance and procedure, on what the facts were and what was the best way to move the case forward. I concluded that I wanted everyone to go before the grand jury and testify freely and fully. This decision, as you will recall, was publicly announced on March 30, 1973. I waived executive privilege in order to permit everybody to testify. I specifically waived executive privilege with regard to conversations with the President, and I waived the attorney-client privilege with John Dean in order to permit him to testify fully and, I hope, truthfully. Finally, on April 14, 3 weeks after I learned of the cover-up from Mr. Dean, Mr. Ehrlichman reported to me on the results of his investigation. As he acknowledged, much of what he had gathered was hearsay, but he had gathered enough to make it clear that the next step was to make his findings completely available to the Attorney General, which I instructed him to do. And the next day, Sunday, April 15, Attorney General Kleindienst asked to see me, and he reported new information which had come to his attention on this matter. And although he was in no way whatever involved in Watergate, because of his close personal ties not only to John Mitchell but to other potential people who might be involved, he quite properly removed himself from the case. We agreed that Assistant Attorney General Henry Peterson, the head of the criminal division, a Democrat and career prosecutor, should be placed in complete charge of the investigation. Later that day, I met with Mr. Peterson. I continued to meet with him, to talk with him, to consult with him, to offer him the full cooperation of the White House. As you will see from these transcripts, even to the point of retaining John Dean on the White House staff for an extra 2 weeks after he admitted his criminal involvement, because Mr. Peterson thought that would make it easier for the prosecutor to get his cooperation in breaking the case, if it should become necessary to grant Mr. Dean's demand for immunity. On April 15, when I heard that one of the obstacles to breaking the case was Gordon Liddy's refusal to talk, I telephoned Mr. Peterson and directed that he should make clear, not only to Mr. Liddy, but to everyone that, and now I quote directly from the tape of that telephone call, as far as the President is concerned, everybody in this case is to talk and to tell the truth. I told him, if necessary, I would personally meet with Mr. Liddy's lawyer to assure him that I wanted Liddy to talk and to tell the truth. From the time Mr. Peterson took charge, the case was solidly within the criminal justice system, pursued personally by the nation's top professional prosecutor with the active personal assistance of the President of the United States. I made clear there was to be no cover-up.